You don't have long to pick up the deals in the Steam Spring Sale, and as you pointed out, I missed a few. Okay, I did miss a few. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the strategy and simulation highlights of the Steam Spring Sale, and of course, I'll be presenting them just like this, with the title, the discount, and the new approximate price in US dollars on screen, while talking you through the game in sort of a fast and loose review style video. And as you can see on screen, we're already looking at our first entry. This is Age of Wonders Planetfall. Age of Wonders, the franchise, is all turn-based strategy. It's a core 4X strategy game as well, so you'll have your progression, your exploration, expansion being core features of the title. And of course, as you can tell, it's set in an alien sci-fi setting. Moreover though, Age of Wonders Planetfall and Age of Wonders 3, which features the same discount, I believe actually franchise-wide, makes it into this video because Age of Wonders 4 is releasing next month, I believe early April. So now might be a great time to familiarize yourself with the franchise, rich in factions, races, and lore, before Age of Wonders 4 releases very soon. Moving on to the next item in our list, this, my friends, is They Are Billions, which released a couple of years ago and in the Steam Spring Sale is at a reasonable but not overwhelming discount of 25% off, bringing it down to around $20 US. It has that kind of feature a little bit like RimWorld or perhaps Dwarf Fortress, in that its discounts tend to not be overwhelming, but the experience itself, its core, is very solid and perhaps deserving of that slightly higher price point. It's a base building and colony sim game. Of course, at its core, like everything else, it's focused on strategy, and here there's a big zombie element to it as well. They Are Billions is, as you can tell by the architecture and world design, a steampunk strategy game, and of course, thanks to the zombies and the swarms of infected, it's set in a post-apocalyptic world, the idea being that you'll build and then defend colonies to survive against the literal billions of infected that are trying to annihilate the last few surviving humans that you are trying to cultivate and foster in your colonies. It is a fantastic base building and colony sim game. I haven't recommended it before, and so I'm really grateful to you for pointing it out to me. Its progression is great. The overall base building element is fantastic, and the sheer number of enemies will blow you away. Moving on to the next item on my list, a game that I fell in love with many years ago and forgot about, it's Endless Legend. At 75% off, it's also the cheapest entry, coming in at around $5, maybe $6 US. Endless Legend is another 4X turn-based strategy game. Although don't worry, we'll definitely get to some different and new interesting picks as we move through. Of course, Endless Legend as a 4X strategy game is all about exploring that world, and this world, as you can tell, is a sci-fi setting. We'll return a little bit more to some sci-fi settings from Amplitude slightly later in the video, but the message that I really want to get across for Endless Legend is twofold. Firstly, you have two options. You could pick up the base game for $5 or $6, or you could move up to a larger edition. I'd recommend the cheapest of the lot. It's called the Endless Legend Definitive Edition. It'll give you all of the core DLC for around $20-ish US. Endless Legend is a great game around building a story and a narrative, and it's perhaps its world building that most attracted me to the game. Its soundtrack and its graphics, although they are 9 years old, do a great job to build a world around the game, and that's something that I really admire about Endless Legend. Moving on to the next item on our list, and I said it would be different, and it sure is. This, my friends, is Battle Brothers. And at 50% off, around $12, Battle Brothers is a fairly easy pickup if you're interested in this world. Let me see if I can convince you that it could be worth a shot. It's a tactical RPG with turn-based combat, and as you will notice on screen, you may very well be put off by the animations or sprites. This is a world perhaps quite different from that we were looking at before in Endless Legend or in future in Endless Space. However, I would encourage you to not be put off by that. This is, of course, a 2D game, but it's an RPG. It's a tactical RPG. And the way that it brings together a procedurally generated, I believe, open world, of course set in that kind of gritty, low-power medieval setting, is fantastic. And then the way that it handles progression through leveling up your men and training them getting more and better equipment. Again, as I say, as you move through that completely open world, procedurally generated campaign, it not only provides you with, I think, a level of satisfaction as you move through, as you find events progress and build a little bit of a story inside of the strategy game, but it also provides you with a heckload of replayability. And so at 50% off, Battle Brothers might just be the slightly different pick for you in the Steam Summer Sale if you've exhausted all other options. Moving along to another great option, this, my friends, is Iron Harvest. Iron Harvest at 75% off, again around $6 US, is a pretty solid pickup. Set in a 1920s world, that is, and I'm a sucker for these, an alternate reality world, where, obviously, the Iron Harvest is upon us. The outcome of World War I was a little bit different, and the world is at war thanks to these giant robot machines. Iron Harvest provides a single-player campaign that has a great story to it. As you can tell, this is the story trailer, though we will have a look at some gameplay a little bit later. But I thought it was important to start with the story trailer, because it is Iron Harvest's story that it delivers on very strongly. Moreover, though, it has a multiplayer and a co-op. The multiplayer is competitive, although with low player counts you may struggle a little bit. But the co-op comes through really strongly as well. Not just, by the way, in co-op fights where you could fight, say, competitively with another player and a ranked match through its combat system, but also inside of that single-player campaign where you can play as co-op through all 20 missions across 3 different campaigns. I think you'll enjoy the alternate reality. Set, of course, in that 1920s period, though, so it is still grounded in some sense of realism, albeit alternate. And, of course, the campaign itself largely focused in and around Europe as well. So, slightly different from some of the sci-fi settings that we've seen already. One of the only alternate history recommendations I can give, because it's one of the only ones that I've played and know of, and a really unique roster of combat units. You have all of your fan favorites like artillery, mechanized infantry, so on and so forth, but of course they're delivered in that slightly alternate setting. It's a great pickup. I'd recommend it for really behind the couch change. Moving along to another entry from Amplitude, this is Endless Space 2. Again, that 75% off discount. God, they love a 75% off discount in a Steam Summer Sale, don't they? At $9, Endless Space 2 is my second favorite sci-fi strategy game out there. Personally, I prefer Stellaris, although Endless Space 2, really, I have to say, delivers in a lot of the same ways that Stellaris does, perhaps sometimes slightly better. At a 2017 release, it is now showing its age, but it is the most recent entry from Amplitude in their Endless Space franchise anyway. You could look back, of course, and potentially pick up the original, but why not stretch for Endless Space 2 at around $8? The things that blew me away the most when I was playing Endless Space 2 were not necessarily its combat system, and not necessarily its planet or city building systems, although I have nothing wrong with them. It was exploring the universe itself. Not just picking up the events, but the beautiful soundtrack that surrounds it. And I know that I've mentioned world building once or twice already in this video, and you might think this guy just thinks that all worlds are built really well. But of course, really I'm just highlighting the best of the best here. And I think that despite its age, Endless Space 2 delivers. There's nothing more satisfying about a space exploration game, in my opinion, outside of potentially some combat, than exploring that world, right? Reaching out to new solar systems, new planets. And Endless Space 2 does a great job at making them easy to understand with overlays and UIs that you're likely familiar with, but also making them incredibly beautiful. Backed with a picturesque soundtrack, Endless Space 2 is a great 4X sci-fi strategy game, and again at that 75% off discount. Why not give it a whirl? Speaking of giving it a whirl, let's take a look at the next entry. I won't even say how much it's discounted by, but this, my friends, is Battletech, published by Paradox. It is a fairly interesting turn-based tactics game, and this is one of more of the core turn-based tactics titles. Whereas already, we've kind of more looked at turn-based 4X or strategy. Here it's about that combat, right? Turn-based tactics takes a really particular focus in on units, on the environment, and on how they're fighting. And that is exactly what Battletech does at 75% off. If you're looking for a mech combat game where there's this sort of brutal interstellar war taking place, then this could be the one for you. Although Phantom Brigade, not on special in the Steam sale, it's important to note, did come out recently, and so maybe Phantom Brigade might be worth your attention as well. It is, of course, 3 or 4 times the price, so I'll leave the ultimate decision up to you, but the information, my friends, is in your hands. Moving along to an honorable mention from my previous video that gets a full mention here. This is Prison Architect. At around $5 or $6 US, you can pick up the base game, no problemo, boss. There is a lot of DLC to go with it, like many other of the Paradox strategy titles, but what I like personally about Prison Architect is how it takes, I think, what a lot of core strategy gamers love about games like RimWorld or Dwarf Fortress, right, those colony sim games, and presents it in a way that is just a little bit easier to understand and manage. Perhaps a slightly better entry point into these story-driven, rich simulation experiences. It is not quite fair to compare it to something like RimWorld or Dwarf Fortress, which is a bit more hardcore and in-depth and detailed, but Prison Architect is a great simulation game, where you build a prison, choose your inmates, potentially play or live as them, hire staff, and ultimately try and design a functioning, ever-growing system inside of a simulation. It is a colony sim as well, but to a lesser extent than some of those other behemoths that I've mentioned. However, back to my core point, at 75% off for chump change, it's a great blend of colony sim and simulation, if you're interested, of course, in building a prison. Moving along to a quick honorable mention, this is Stardew Valley. It probably doesn't need a lot of explanation. Stardew Valley is a farming sim with pixel graphics, set as you can see in this sort of bird's eye 2D look-down view. It's got single player, it's got multiplayer. It has 465,000 reviews, coming out to an average of an overwhelmingly positive reception, and for good reason. It's fun on the couch, it's fun on the Switch, it's fun with friends, on the computer. It doesn't really matter where you're playing it. If you're looking for a farming sim that builds an interesting world with a bit of combat thrown in the mix, Stardew Valley is an easy recommend. Next is Total War Warhammer 3. It's the most expensive entry on the list, making it a slightly harder recommend for me than most, because let's be real, at $40 US, you could pick up 5 other titles on this list, like Prison Architect, Endless Space, Iron Harvest, maybe chuck in an Age of Wonders there as well. But that's not to take away, of course, from Total War Warhammer 3, which, in defense of its price, only came out around a year ago, whereas I'm comparing it to games that have come out almost a decade ago, so maybe not a fair price comparison. It has moved a little bit more towards positivity in critical acclaim and reflection since its release. It came out mostly positive, but has now sort of moved up back towards around that 80 to 85% approval. It is a classic Total War game, in that, of course, it's a strategy game at the world view, and then when we look in, we receive a really satisfying turn-based strategy element. It is an RTS game at that world-building level, where you build your cities, move your armies, and pass turns, and of course a Total War sci-fi title. It may be for you. I can recommend it as a pretty fun game, like almost every other entry on this list. It's definitely worth your time. Thank you so much for joining me today as we looked at some of the best missed strategy and simulation deals, and I'll see you next time.